This video is sponsored by HeroForge. More on their awesome service later in the video.
It's tabletop time.
I'm Dave.
I'm Murray.
And I'm Jen.
And today we are back with our Age of Sigmar board. It's only last week that we were talking... Wait, last year. Last year that we were talking about building this board. We haven't forgotten about it. So we are going to launch into basically planning what on earth we're actually doing and how this board is going to come about. But we know two things. One, it needs to center around the watermill that we previously made. And two, by extension, it needs to have a river running across it.
Who gets to work on the river?
Dib's not it.
I'm making the river! So what are you thinking? I've got mine pretty much decided for me. Should we do some planning?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, having the river, that's going to take up the bulk of the build. What I'm thinking with the river is to actually go a fairly intense width at certain points, taking up quite a lot of the board. But I'm thinking that at some points, perhaps here, it will be a sheer cliff with a wide river, and then we'll actually keep the width, but the elevation will shift to have fording points where you can actually just walk down a gentle slope and cross shallow water. And that way models can actually cross a lot of the points on the river, or perhaps a major point up here. And then I'm thinking we do a bridge somewhere.
So I'm thinking I'd really like to have some wheat fields, and I have a little bit of an idea how I could go about that. We'd have some fence line or something, and then we have like nice rows of the wheat.
For my side of the board, I'm thinking of putting some gentle cliffs, but more specifically, I'm thinking of like rice terraces. I'm thinking I kind of want it to be like that, and then it slowly sort of layers up. And I think I maybe want a smaller version on the other side with maybe a path or a clear way to go down.
I wanted to say a big thank you to Woodland Scenics, who actually have sent us this huge range of awesome product to use on exactly projects like this board.
Be my only way, be my one away, you're my only way.
All right, so I've got a secret weapon that I'm planning on using. And that secret weapon is called technology. So while Jen and Murray hang out in here and play around with knives, I'm gonna get hot with this hot wire cutter.
Be my heartbreak, be my one away, be my only way, you're my only love. Be my heartbreak, be my one away, be my only way, you're my only love.
The moment of truth. That's pretty precise. I'm pretty happy with that, given that I like eyeballed it based off a sketch. I'll have to chalk out the bottom a little bit to raise it, but I think that's pretty perfect elevation for the bottom of the watermill.
Down the necklace, doesn't mean a thing, just know I spend it. Doesn't change a thing, just know I spend it on you. Get you Louis if you want it, no, that's nothing, no. You can tell me that it's something, but it's nothing, no. Acting funny, but you tell me that you love me, though. Hey, you tell me that you love me, though. Wanna believe it, but I feel it, that it's something wrong.
All right, so we've laser cut these sides, and Murray and I are currently pushing wood together to make sure we get a nice clean seal. Jen, how's it looking?
Out of 10,
Yeah.
how's the squish?
Pretty airtight. I'd
Pretty
say.
flush?
Yeah.
All right, by putting these little MDF sides on it, it ensures that the boards will slot together really nicely in play, and then we can put some texture paints over the top of them and hide that seam. All right, so I'm gonna be using some of the Woodland Scenics lightweight plaster. I'm thinking of making a couple of small rock molds and just putting them around the riverbed to give the water a bit of texture and some areas you probably shouldn't dive in. We've been so good at wearing respirators. With my plaster setting, it was time for me to use some trusty sculptor mold. We've got a big bag of the stuff here. So that'll allow me to texture out some hills really quickly. And one of the pluses is it dries within an hour, so I'll be able to pretty quickly move on to using some textures and pigments.
I've made a little hill, and I had a little think about what I can put onto it to make a bit of a visual interest. I'm going to go with a little elven waystone, help her ward off evil, and maybe as a little monument to the gods, as it were. I've got myself some polystyrene. I'm going to cut it out into pieces, make it easier to build, and we'll have a nice little centerpiece for my side of the map that isn't just the wheat field.
Now, while the focus of this video is building a really cool farmstead and watermill board, it just didn't feel right to have an Age of Sigmar board without some cool models to go with it. So knowing that I needed some non-combatant civilians that felt at home in this environment, I went straight to Hero Forge, the sponsor of this video. Hero Forge's custom online character builder has thousands of items, numerous races, and infinite posing options with complete control over how you pose your models. And this was perfect to allow me to create 3 farmers that felt at home in the slightly Lumineth and slightly Cities of Sigmar inspired world. With Hero Forge's impressive Color 2.0 system, it allows you to get a visual of how these models would look on the table before you've even painted them. Now, if you're looking to grab some Hero Forge models, there are heaps of options. You can have them delivered to you printed in a variety of materials, including metal for those collector pieces, and pre-colored for those who are not interested in painting. But in particular, my favorite method of getting Hero Forge models is using Hero Forge's Pro Plus subscription. This service allows you early access to parts such as the samurai components that I was looking at while I was building these models, but it also comes with 5 digital credits for downloads every month included in the Pro Plus subscription. So if you constantly make models with Hero Forge and are 3D printing all the time, the Hero Forge Pro Plus subscription could be the way to go. It allows you to populate your game tables with numerous NPCs, and speaking of that, also includes themed packs of pre-made models by Hero Forge as well. If you're a fan of Hero Forge, definitely check out Hero Forge Pro Plus subscription today. Now, let's get back to making the world that these little farmers are going to call home. All right, so we've done a lot of our wet work. Jen, your board's super textured. Loving that. I've done my gouge out here. I've fixed in this, and
Yep.
Murray.
I'm about to start mine.
Okay, you're about to start. I'm like, your board's looking a little bit empty at this stage of the day.
Nah, it's all good. Look, I've got a...
Okay, well, you got a sweet little obelisk, so that's good. All right, so we've got about an hour until the end of the day.
Yep.
By the end of today, I want everything that requires overnight to dry. That's my goal.
So we're just going to cover these gaps between the tables with some masking tape. That'll allow us to sort of just keep covering it with the ground textures, the sand and whatever we might put on top. And at the very end, we can come along with a knife and just sort of cleanly separate the tables. And it should look really nice.
All right, so I'm gonna make the base of my river, and I've done a little bit of looking, and most rivers that I've seen pretty much come down to pebbles. It's just a lot of river rocks, but with a little bit of dirt at the bottom. So I'm gonna make a sloppy dirt mix, and then after I've put down the lowest point of the river, I'm then going to build up with different sizes of pebbles into the mix until it's mostly pebbles, starting with some pigment.
Nice.
So to build up my pebble mix, I'm using some of Woodland Scenics' buff coarse rocks. So we're gonna add that into the mix. I'm also gonna put in a little bit of this Woodland Scenics talus, which is sort of like a smaller pebble mix. Then I'm gonna add incrementally more of the talus as the riverbed goes towards the surface.
So we're gonna mix up a nice pigment for our dirt. This is gonna be based in the summer, so I think it's sort of a healthy but sort of dry and cracked color earth. So a little bit tan, a bit sandy. I'm gonna use a little bit of pigment, some sand, and a little bit of sawdust. That's looking like a pretty good color, I think. Now for the magic glue. Blech.
All right, so we're pretty much at the end of the day. We're getting close to having all these textures on. How are you feeling?
Pretty good. It comes together really quick.
It's a very pooey, ugly phase, But don't worry, this is pretty much all gonna get covered in phlox and undergrowth and grass. This is just laying down some texture and a bit of a base color for beneath all of the foliage. So that'll be good.
Nice.
Good work, team.
Woo!
Hey.
I'm gonna go start transferring footage and you guys keep...
Righto. Lovely.
So I knew we'd be dry brushing a fairly large surface, so it was time to get a big brush and a lot of paint. Most of the ground will actually end up being covered by phlox, so this can be super rough and only semi-dry brushed. I don't mind if it gets streaky, I don't mind if it gets messy. The main point is...
Do you mind if it gets grimy?
Absolutely not. Grime this up. The main point at this stage is actually just to build out just different colors so that if there's anywhere underneath phlox that you can see a few different tones in the ground underneath. And one of the other happy benefits of doing this is it dislodges any clumps of not properly secure modeling compound. All right, so I've left these plaster molds to dry overnight. I did use the lightweight plaster, so I'm not sure how they're going to turn out in the end, but hey, it was worth a shot. Let's see how they did. Okay, that's done pretty well. This has worked really well. For how cheap and easy it is, this Woodland Scenics lightweight plaster, like bulking out dioramas, this is kind of awesome. So I feel that a way that a lot of the texture gets added in these builds is through iterative layers of different phlox and textures. So for the riverbed, I'm going to mix up a blend of Woodland Scenics fine turf. We've got some weeds and soil mix. I'm gonna mix them together in an empty container. And I'm just gonna sprinkle delicately a little garnish of seaweed and river muck down the bottom of the riverbed. Much as I had done with the green in the river, I decided to make a turf mix out of some of the Woodland Scenics turfs, including a coarse one, to basically be the undergrowth for our static grass, which we'd be putting on later. This will apply a lot of the thickness and color, whereas the static grass will provide texture. So we can bulk out areas of the board that are going to be more heavily greened by putting on a more heavy coat of the turf mix, and then make it all look a bit more alive with that static grass.
Alrighty, so it's been about a day and it's finally my turn to come into the studio and get started on my side of the board. And I'm gonna help Dave out a little bit as well today, I think, and start finally putting it all together. I'm gonna start with doing some of these riverbeds, a darker, murky sort of color, and then doing these rocks a nice, just a desert yellow, just to give it a quick dry brush on top. So yeah, let's get started.
So it's time for us to incorporate the rocks that I had sprayed last night before giving them a bit of a dry brush. So we have our trusty hot glue gun, the easiest, fastest adherer in the West. It's time to pick some places where we should put these rocks. So I've made my fence pieces and I've placed them on the board where I think we want to allude to a fence. It's really important not to over clutter a table. So while realistically in my head, I think all these roads would have these little fences running along them, I think for the purposes of a gaming board, it's better to just suggest fences by putting them at the turns and some choice corners, which allows large base miniatures, monsters and everything to freely roam across the board. I don't have to worry about these little barricades everywhere. So yeah, it's time to glue them in and then move on to flocking. So the first static grass blend I'm going to lay down is a mix of 12mm and 4mm grass, and I've kept them towards the lighter tones. I'm actually going to be concentrating these around the bottom of any hilly rise. These kinds of static grass are not going to work well with models because they're so long. So by concentrating them in areas where you couldn't stand a model anyway, we can add a lot of life to the board without reducing the play area. Should be dry on that. Now we have to do the ever fun task of flipping these boards and shaking off a bunch of the loose static grass to see how it really looks. Da, 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 da. Oh, it's snowing. Hey Murray, you want to come bang the top of this?
It's looking pretty good. We do need to sort of wait for the PVA to dry overnight. So while we're waiting, we're gonna stick some tufts on. I've got some beautiful flowers that we're just gonna start putting around and make it look all pretty.
Update time on the wheat field. I may have been slightly more ambitious than was warranted, which has never ever occurred on this channel before. The wheat field is kind of looking pretty cool. My technique is sort of evolving and advancing a bit. There's some discrepancy between thin and thick ones, but I think that just makes it look organic, and that's what I'm going with. This is also relatively cost effective. All that I've done is buy like 2 paintbrushes from a local hardware store, and I'm just cutting them up and mixing the bristles together. That's really all you need, and then some flock and stuff to coat it with. It's not bad. I'm getting a whole field done.
There are a few ways to do a deep pour or a resin pour with water that makes sure that nothing gets out through any cracks, and it's nice and sealed and contained. There are some methods with Mod Podge or some clear sealing putties. Then there's also the fast, lazy way called the hot glue gun, which is my go-to. Now, why am I team hot glue gun? Because it's extremely quick, it dries quickly, it fills the gaps, and it's easy. But mostly because it dries quickly. The moment of truth is here. It is time to pour my first. Oh my God, it is so hot. There is apparently a chemical reaction taking place here that has made things very spicy. I feel like I'm gonna need more water effects. The colors worked, because it's pretty thin up here in the shallows, and then it's just got enough. Is that satisfying or what? Gravity, do your best. So after coming in to see how our resin has settled, I'm not quite happy with the color. The alcohol inks were always going to be a little bit sketchy, so it's settled a bit unevenly, and I'm going to try and fix that. Jazza suggested some color theory to pull back the yellow, use a little bit of a reddish brown. So I'm going to mix up some of Woodland Scenic's realistic water and just do a really thin pour over the top that will almost act like a color filter that will tint the color underneath as the light passes through, or something, I don't know. I'm not a science man. We've got some resin curing on the bridge, and it is definitely time to start to bring this table to life. So we're thinking some Woodland Scenics, forest canopy. We're gonna chuck a bunch of trees down. And I've decided, because, you know, we always love taking it further than we probably should, to make a mega tree, I wanna use this stick, glue together, basically build an entire large tree so we can have one really big tree just near the farmhouse. I think that's gonna look great.
Time for us to say a huge thank you to all of our patrons.
Now, as you might be aware, we've started shouting out the names of all of our new patrons at the $5 tier or higher. So thank you to Alessio Battaglia.
And Lincoln Hall.
Well, it looks like we're all done. And guys, this is amazing. Good work. It just looks so good.
This is awesome.
I'm very stoked. I think we've done really well. It's so nice to see just a fantasy farmland, like a sweet little environment. You never see it. Age of Sigmar is just war. This is life. Now, us completing this board means that after we've done the post-production on our kill team match, it means it might be time for us to film that long-awaited battle report between Jazza's Aurochs and my Stormcast Eternals. So stay tuned for that.
And we just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor for this video, Hero Forge. So thank you all so much for watching, and get ready for next time when we come back with more tabletop time.
Yep. And if you like tables, let us know. I mean...
This is a pretty good table. I'd eat off of this. Wouldn't that be cool? Like having your dinner plate and you can... It's very scenic.
Yeah?
You get some fish.
Yeah.
Please, that resin is still not cured.